What's your name?
Jeffrey Barnes,
And where are you from?
Rex, Georgia.
Alright, so tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Well, I was blessed. I had two of the greatest parents on earth. My childhood was kind of like a country version of Leave It to Beaver. It was just that nice. No big, no big trouble ever. My parents talked to me when I did wrong, disciplined me like they should. I was very blessed to have parents like what I had and the friends that I had. We didn't live way out in the country like what you would think. What it was the Rex was all country, but they built one subdivision. Had 2 streets and 20 houses. But in behind our house was all woods, and pastures, cows, horses. I could go hunting in the afternoon when I wanted to. If I wanted to play golf, I could play golf in the pasture. So it was nice. It was really nice.
Tell me a little bit about a couple hunting experiences you had out in the pasture.
Well, I didn't hunt in the pasture, but I played golf in the pasture, rode horses in the pasture. Back in the 1970s, Ted Turner, when he first opened Channel 17, was showing live bullfights from Mexico. There was a bullfighter, an American bullfighter, that I wanted to be like. So I decided I wanted to be a bullfighter. And one day my parents came home and they looked out in the pasture and they saw me with a raincoat draped over a baseball bat. That was going to be my sword, and I was trying to get this bull to charge. That's probably one of the bigger whippings I've ever got in my life.
Okay.
And the bullfighter's name was Rob Ryan. He's actually, I looked him up one day just for the heck of it when I learned how to use the internet, and it actually had him in there as an American bullfighter.
Okay. How were your high school days?
I was not a great student. I was just an average student, 2.7 grade point average. My senior year, I bumped it up to a 3.0 and got an all A's and B's award. I always seemed to be a tick behind on the academic stuff. A lot of that was due to being so busy as a kid, playing baseball or riding my motorcycle or going hunting. My parents pushed me to be better, and my senior year I did do better. All A's and B's was the best I ever did in high school.
What about athletics in high school?
Athletics in high school, I played football, hurt my head, quit. And soccer was not very well known back then. And they played it in the wintertime, because that was the only slot they had for it back then. And the football coach recruited everybody that either played football or something like that. We probably had 5 kids on the whole team that had ever played rec soccer. But I lettered in it, played goalie, did an okay job. We weren't an outstanding team, but we were competitive. It was pretty cool.
What's the one experience while you were growing up that you feel shaped you into the person you are today? A particular experience.
That's a tough one. I'd say my father, as far as a personality went and the type of person he was your modern day Abe Lincoln. He believed a man could only be as good as his word. A handshake was as good as a signed contract. And he taught me to be the same way. And since then, that's the way I have lived my life. Try to be honest. Don't steal. Cherish what you got. I think his influence in that area wasn't just one event, it was many events, but he was really good at talking sense.
Given that you're from a completely different generation from now, what's one good story of you getting disciplined as a child that stuck with you?
Well, other than the bullfight, there was once where I decided I was old enough that I could walk down the road and go to the local mom and pop's grocery store by myself without telling my parents where I was going. Well, the owner of the store would actually babysit us once in a while for my parents if they wanted to go somewhere. So they knew my parents pretty well. Well, I was up there hanging out at the store right next to a major highway, and I look over to my left, and there's my mom with a switch. And she was highly upset, crying. She was so upset because she'd been looking for me. And the store owners are the ones that called her. Well, with that switch, she beat me in syllables all the way home. By that I mean she was whack, I whack, we'll never whack, let you, you know. It was kind of one of those kind of deals. That one I remember very vividly. And then Daddy came home, and it started all over again. Needless to say, I never went to that store again without my parents until I was much older, and even then I asked for permission before I went there.
And what lesson did you learn from this experience?
I wasn't as grown up as I thought I was, and that it was seeing my mom in tears because she was so worried because she didn't know where I was, and then finding out that I'm at a store that's right there on the main highway with tractor-trailer trucks going up and down at high speeds. I learned that the last thing I wanted to do was see that look on my mother's face again because I knew it hurt her.
Cool. So, out of high school, what did you end up doing after high school?
Well, after high school, I was an artist in high school, won a couple awards, and I was working part-time for the J.C. Penney Company. And at that time, the J.C. Penney Company had their own advertising department where they had 4 artists that drew shoes and clothing and lawnmowers, anything they were selling. At that time, it was very expensive to pay to have a picture put in the newspaper, but you could do a black and white drawing out of ink, and they could put it in there cheaper. And so my first job out of high school, I was an advertising artist for J.C. Penney. Unfortunately, about 6 months after getting that job, technology got to the point where it was just as inexpensive to put an actual photograph of the product in the paper, and they let everybody go, and I went back to college. I went to college for the first time.
How was your college experience?
I was about as good a college student academically as I was in high school. I was at a 2.75, and during that time, I started racing cars, which gave me a great knowledge of cars, and I worked at a full-service gas station, and I started off just going out there and pumping gas. And then they found that I could fix cars, and that took my career down a different road. Next thing I knew, I was making very, very good money, enough to stand on my own repairing automobiles. And I eventually dropped out of college.
So you mentioned racing cars. What's your favorite memory of racing cars?
Winning. Winning. I won a lot. That I did enjoy. And that transferred over to when I started racing go-karts. I enjoy winning.
What is your most memorable win on the track?
The most memorable win was I was in South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, racing a national race where I'm racing with the best drivers in the country. And I qualified for the pole and I led every lap. That one was good. That one was very special. And then there was another one, a race in Athens, Georgia, where they closed down several streets and they have a go-kart race through the streets. And the number one driver in the nation was in that race. And he and I finished first and second, and we were way out there all by ourselves with nobody near us. I passed him twice. Unfortunately, he passed me 3 times. So he won, I finished second, but that was with the best driver in the nation. So I felt really proud of myself on that one.
Run me through just the entire race as a whole in Athens.
It was neat, man. It wasn't a sanctioned track, so the surfaces were completely different. And when you're on a sanctioned track, you don't have manhole covers. Well, when you're in a little go-kart that has no suspension and you're running 80 mile an hour going through a corner and you hit one of those manhole covers, you move about 10 feet over to the opposite direction when you hit them. It launches you a little bit. That part was pretty, you really had to be on that wheel when you hit one of them. And most of the time, when I'd be taking a line to pass somebody coming out of one of those corners, the manhole cover was going to be there. And you'd come within inches of either hitting the other driver or hitting a hay bale that they put on the sides of the track. So it was pretty hairy. And there was one time when I did just barely brush up to one of the hay bales. But that was all in the beginning of the race. After about the first couple of laps, me and that other fella, we kind of got out front and put a lot of distance between us and everybody else. And after that, I only had him to contend with.
What was that one-on-one like?
Man, I got to tell you, I was nervous. I knew who this guy was. He was in all the magazines. I had been in some of the magazines, but this guy was a big deal. I mean, they put him on a plane and sent him to wherever, had full sponsorships, and I was actually riding. That race was one of the first races where I did have a sponsor. I had a go-kart company from Italy that gave me a chassis, a local engine builder that gave me an engine, and Maxxis tires were sponsoring me. And that it made me feel like I was legitimately one of the big dogs. Even though I was just a local guy that, didn't grow up racing go-karts. This guy been racing go-karts since he was 8 years old. I didn't start racing go-karts until I was 28 or 27. So it was cool.
So you've mentioned before that you played in a couple bands.
More than a couple. That started in high school. Just me and a group of friends got a band together and played for the local talent show. And then another group of guys in high school that were better than the ones that I was with, they actually got paying jobs, even though we're still in high school. It was mostly stuff like junior high dances, but they were very good for their age, and I fit in all right, and I went in and did my job, and actually, I guess if you get paid for it, they can think of you as a professional, so I became a professional bass player at age 17. while in college, I joined another band, and they played nightclubs. That was pretty cool, and it just kind of kept going from there and got pretty... I played with a lot of very good people. I played with people that went on to play with big bands, like some of the guys that played in Travis Tritt's band are people that I've worked with, or Doug Stone. As you know yourself, 15 years ago, I played with Chris Cagle myself. But the best part of the music stuff was the hottest band in Atlanta through the 70s and 80s and 90s was a band called Phoenix. And I'd played with, a couple of dozen bands before then, and I got a phone call from Phoenix, probably the most nervous I'd ever been on an audition. I was lucky enough to get the job, and I stayed with them for about 15 years, and that was really a better highlight than even playing with a Grammy Award winner, because they were good, man. They were really good.
And you spent a lot of time with Phoenix. Tell me a little bit about that time.
Well, the leader of Phoenix was two guys, Charlie and Sonny. I became very close with Sonny. He actually became kind of my best friend, and we rode motorcycles together other than playing music together. And we got really, really, really close. In fact, he kept our first child, your sister. They babysitted her the first year of her life. Like I said, we got really close. He ran the band like a drill sergeant. He could be quite ornery when it was necessary. But with that band, I could go play one night for a corporate job and make $500. Where the other bands I worked with, I'd play, let's say, a weekend job, Friday and Saturday, and wouldn't make but $100 for the 2 nights, and I could go with Phoenix and make $500 in one night. Big difference in the quality of the band, and they were actually a business, not just a bunch of guys playing. It was well run, and that's why it lasted for 30 years.
I remember you mentioning previously a lot of pranks that you guys would pull on each other.
Well, we had a guy named Charlie. He played keyboard and trumpet. His profession, he was a karate teacher. And believe it or not, this karate teacher, who basically had no fear, was actually petrified of mayonnaise. He couldn't stand the sight of it. If you tried to chase him with it, the karate teacher would run from you. And one night, to play a prank on him, we were playing out at Stone Mountain at their really big resort out there. It's also a hotel. Well, they gave the band a suite. It was a huge room. They had a meeting table in there that would hold about 20 people, and that meeting table was full of food. I mean, we had roast beef, we had caviar, we had salmon. But unfortunately, there was also a squeezed jar of mayonnaise. Well, Charlie's ritual after our gig, because we did some stuff where we danced and stuff like that, and Charlie was the leader of that. He'd be pretty sweaty. So his routine was always to take a shower after our gig. Well, on one of our breaks, me and the guitar player snuck up into the room, found his bag where he keeps his clothes and shower stuff. He always brushed his teeth afterward. Well, I squeezed out part of his toothpaste, and I hooked that squeezed jar of mayonnaise up to it, and I filled his toothpaste up with mayonnaise. When the gig was over and he went up there to take a shower, me and the guitar player knew better than to go up there. So we just stayed downstairs. We had already brought our clothes down, and we changed in the bathroom. We were down there for about 30, 45 minutes before he showed up. And he didn't say a thing, not a word. So we thought, wow, maybe he didn't brush his teeth. Well, the next gig we were at, we were setting up equipment. This was like a week later. And I went to the bathroom, and the club that we were playing at, or the gig we were playing at, nobody's there yet. We're early setting up equipment. And the bathroom's rather large, and of course bathrooms don't have windows. Well, I went to the bathroom, and all of a sudden, the lights went out. I was in a stall with a door. The lights go out, and then I hear Charlie's voice, the karate teacher. I bet you're the one that monkeyed with my toothpaste. Well, at that point, I'm expecting to get whipped. So there I am, a grown man in the dark in the bathroom, one foot against the toilet and both hands up against the door so he can't get in. Well, after 3 or 4 minutes, and I don't hear him moving, I still can't see. It's pitch black. So I figured, hey, if he's out there waiting, I'm just going to have to take whatever he gives me. I found the wall and in the dark and motivated my way down. Finally found the light switch, and I turned it on with my fist up, prepared to defend myself. And then I realized he's no longer in the bathroom. He actually just said what he said and very gently closed the door. What I didn't know was the rest of the band is on stage setting up equipment, and they are timing me to see how long it took my scared butt to come out of the bathroom.
So you mentioned playing with Chris Cagle. Run me through that whole experience, like from start to end, how that went.
All right, the way that one came about, a lot of these name artists, they don't just go on tour. They also do corporate jobs. And a baseball player named Josh Reddick, all-star player, I think he actually won at least one World Series ring with Houston, I think, and played in the World Series with the Dodgers as well. But anyhow, he had a special function down in South Georgia, and he hired Chris Cagle and, oh man, another guy from American Idol whose name I cannot remember. Anyhow, I had worked with some musicians in Macon that were pretty well connected. And instead of Chris Cagle, bringing his whole band, they just hired him, and then they hired local musicians, to play. And the guys in Macon got the job, and they called me up here in Griffin and asked me if I would do the job with them. That's how that one came about. And it paid, I think, $400 or $500 for just a few hours' work, even though it was a long drive. But we got to all hang out. They had trailers for all of us. And I got to hang out with Chris Cagle and talk to him. And I got to hang out with Josh Reddick and got Josh Reddick to sign a baseball for my son, that being you. And then I got my passes. We all have passes to go backstage around our neck. And I got him to sign a couple of those to give to my other two children. And he was super nice. He flew down from California that day, showed up at the gig in a limo, and we did our thing. I learned the music actually on the way to the gig. I had never played any of his stuff before, but on the way there, we had gotten a list of what songs he was going to sing of his, and what songs Josh Sanders, that was the guy from American Idol, what he was going to sing. And, we got there, a good 2 hours ahead of time. Chris got there about 45 minutes before the gig. And we all hung out in the trailer, talked about it. We went on stage and did a real quick rehearsal, playing portions of the song, not the whole song. And then, the gig started and it went over real well, and I had a great time. And made it, good payday for a few hours' work.
Any memorable stories from that one?
Well, yeah, I guess this part will be memorable. Um, Josh Reddick, the baseball player, became rather intoxicated, and Chris asked him to come out and sing part of a song with him, and we played a Garth Brooks song, I've Got Friends in Low Places, and I can tell you that Josh Reddick has to stick with baseball. He's got to be the god-awfulest singer I have ever heard. You would think that he would have been making a real fool out of himself, but it was his gig and a lot of his people there, and they thought it was hilarious.
So you told me a while back a story about your uncle and how he got shot. Can I get you to kind of recount that for me?
Yeah, back in the 70s, a lot of South Georgia and the country, they were still a little closer towards the darker ages. Had an uncle that, well, he was an alcoholic. A lot of that side of the family was. But anyhow, he went on vacation with two of his sons and his wife, and they were visiting her in-laws down in South Georgia. There's one guy down there that kind of owned everything, almost like something you see in a movie. But anyhow, that guy had been threatened, and one of his rental houses was burned down deliberately, and somebody inside it actually passed away. Well, they had threatened him personally. Now, my uncle has nothing to do with that, but it was on a Sunday. It was a dry county, so they're going to go try to find this guy that sells booze illegally, and they're going down this dirt road that this rich guy lives on. Well, the rich guy had just been threatened, so he hired men with high-powered rifles to sit on both sides of their dirt road in front of his house and hide in the trees. Well, my uncle was in the back seat. His 16-year-old son was driving. His 14-year-old son was in the back with him, and his brother-in-law was in the front passenger seat. He was trying to give directions on how to find this guy that sold the illegal liquor. They were driving very slowly because they were trying to figure out where this guy lived at, and they happened to come across this rich guy's house. Well, the guys with the rifles, all they saw was a car slow down, going real slow, so they made the assumption that my uncle and them were the people that had threatened this guy. So they opened fire on the car, trying to shoot the tires out of it, which they did successfully. But my 16-year-old cousin floored it and got out of there. Well, my uncle, true redneck, always got a gun with him, was disappointed that he didn't get a chance to shoot back. So with his 16-year-old driving and a 14-year-old in the back seat, he makes them turn around and go back to where they were shot at. Of course, now he was intoxicated. I'm sure that had a lot to do with it, but he was also a very mean-spirited guy. When they got back there, my uncle started shooting out the window, and one of the other guys, the hired guys, actually shot him right through his chest with a high-powered rifle. It went in one side, out the other. He fell over into the 14-year-old's lap, hollered, "I'm hit." The 16-year-old floors it, gets out of there. They've got 4 flat tires, and they're trying to drive to a hospital. In the end, when my parents and my grandparents went down there, since this guy owned everything, he told the local hotel not to rent them a room. So they had to go a hotel town over, and it was right at the county line, and the sheriff came by several times that night shining spotlights through the window. But in the end, they really didn't know which guy fired the trigger. There were several gunmen. They just blamed one of them. He got involuntary manslaughter and never served a day. But that's just the way things were back then.
And then I remember a couple of couple of bar stories you've told. There was one where somebody got stabbed. I don't remember who it was, but they got stabbed.
Okay, yeah. A friend of mine named Carlton. He was, well, much like my uncle. He was a wild one, power drinker, and got into an argument with another group of people, kind of drug the rest of us that were with him into it. Next thing I know, Carlton, we're trying to get Carlton to get in the car and keep his mouth shut so we could just get out of there. And this one guy that was these other folks pushed the door closed on him while he was standing up and used a knife and cut him about 5 times. And next thing I know, all of us are swinging and hitting somebody, and we all wound up in a car and took off. And then we wound up taking Carlton to the hospital, and he wound up getting something like 25 or 30 stitches in several different places. Just shows the stupidity of drunk people.
I remember you telling me that one of your biggest influences growing up was your father.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you have a very interesting story about him that you'd like to tell.
Yeah, the interesting story happened before I was born. I told you that he was kind of like Abe Lincoln. Well, when my mother was pregnant with my sister, it's going to be the first one born, they had moved to Atlanta because Dad was selling insurance. They went with another couple to a movie theater. And while they're in the theater, my dad realizes that he's left the car lights on. So he walks out of the theater, and this is in Atlanta, so he has to walk a couple blocks to get there. And he turns the lights out, which is a good thing, because if not, they were going to have a dead battery. Well, when he went to try to go back in, my mother had the ticket stubs. So my father tried reasoning with them, and they said, about the ticket stub, you're not coming in. Well, my dad, as well as being a college athlete, was also a boxer. So my dad starts fighting, and next thing you know, it's 5-on-1, and he's winning. So one of them gets a huge mop handle and whacks him over the head about 10 times. He got something like 40 to 60 stitches. But anyhow, they finally knock him to the point where he's incapacitated. Well, my mom doesn't know any of this stuff's going on, and she starts getting worried about him because he hasn't came back. So they came out of the theater portion into the lobby just in time to see the police taking him to jail. And they go try to get him out of jail, and the bail is too high. And this is in Atlanta, so they call his parents, my grandparents, down in Hogansville, which is an hour-and-a-half ride from Atlanta. Well, during that time that it took them to get up there and pay the bail money, the police never took my dad to a hospital, never looked at him at all. He sat in there and just kept bleeding. Anyhow, they wound up taking him to hospital, and it was something ridiculous, like 40 or 60 staples in his head. I always figured maybe that's why he balded early, but he had several scars up there. That was out of character for him, but he was worried about a pregnant wife. So he went to fighting the guys. Apparently he hurt a couple of them pretty good. The other funny, well, not funny, but my dad and one of his cousins were fishing in the Chattahoochee up in North Georgia. And they're wading out in the water, and they're separated by about 60 yards. My dad was upstream. Well, his cousin's sitting there fishing, and all of a sudden he feels something bump into him, and it's my dad, face down in the water. My dad slipped on a rock, hit his head, knocked him out, and the current took him down, and he bumped into his cousin, which if he hadn't have, he would have drowned. But instead he picked him up, somehow or another got him to where he was breathing. I don't know if he put pressure on his chest or slapped him in the face, but my father lived through that one. But if it hadn't been for his cousin, just having him bump into him, he probably would have drowned.
You played a lot of sports as a kid, and I remember one particular story being at the rec fields when you got left.
Yeah, much like the way our family has been, we lived at the ball fields. And we were at a ball field. My dad was coaching my sister's team, and he was coaching my team. Well, we played our game, and my sister's game was several hours later. My mom and dad went in two separate vehicles. Well, my game was over, and my mom was going to go home, and so she left, and so she told me I'm supposed to ride with Dad to get home. Well, I got with some of my buddies, and we were running all over the park, and it was a pretty big park. And my sister's game was over. I didn't realize it, and my dad is the one who will be turning the lights to the park out when he leaves. Well, all of a sudden the lights go out. I'm at the other end of the park, away from where he's at, and I watched him and my sister drive off down the road, and there I am in the middle of nowhere in a park. I'm the only person there, and I have been left, and this is before cell phones. I didn't know anybody that lived close by. I was very panicky and paranoid. I found a picnic table, and I sat on it and shook and worried. And then when my dad got home, I was hoping they realized they left me, before then, but they actually got home. My sister got out and was taking a shower. She was a catcher. She was nasty. It was like 20 minutes before my mom finally said, "Where's Jeff?" And my dad said, "Well, you brought him home." She said, "No, he was supposed to tell you that you were bringing him home." Then they realized they had left me 20 miles away at a ballpark at midnight by myself. So my dad flew back up there, and fortunately I saw him when he pulled in, and I ran to the truck, and he saw me. He did a lot of apologizing, and actually had like he had tears in his eyes because he was worried because it wasn't the best of neighborhoods. But fortunately, nothing happened, and I made it home. And I guarantee you, after that, my parents always knew which one was bringing me home.
One of my favorite childhood dogs, Sadie. You used to take her fishing down at the reservoir a lot. I remember one particular story of her jumping in.
Oh yeah, she was part Labrador and part Rottweiler. Very big dog, but did have the webbed feet, and she thought nothing at all about swimming all the way across the reservoir. But anyhow, whenever I catch a fish and I bring it up, she would try to grab it. So you'd have to bring your fish in and then grab the dog. Well, once I took the fish off the hook and I would throw it back in, she'd jump in after it. And eventually, she started thinking, realizing that she had to jump a little quicker. So next thing I knew, I had one, I held her, I took the fish off, and just as soon as I started acting like I was going to throw it in, she jumped. Well, she grabbed the fish and brought it back. After that, it got to a point where I'd have to put her in between my legs and hold her while I threw the fish back in. Well, that worked fine for a while, but there was one day where I landed one that was kind of large. It was about a 3-pound bass, and she was about 20 feet to my left. Well, this bass jumped, made a big splash, and then I heard a 95-pound splash where she jumped in, and I really love this dog. I'm trying to reel this fish in, and I'm thinking that she's going after the fish, but I'm thinking that if she gets her paws wrapped up in the fishing line, she could drown, and I'd be just stupid enough to go in there and try to get her if she was drowning. I put my pole in the water so the line would stay low, and I continued reeling, and dang it, right before she got to the bank, the dog's head went underwater. She came up with the bass in her mouth. I just continued walking backwards and reeling and calling her, and she brought it right to me. Something about had somebody videoing it. I think it'd be something I'd cherish forever, and might even, send into one of those TV stations, but it was something pretty neat. She was a very unique dog.
Now, when we had Sadie, she was a byproduct of our neighbors.
Yeah.
And she had one very big night where she broke into their house.
Yes, she did.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the way we got the dog was they saw us with the other dogs that we had, so they wanted to be dog people too. So they got Sadie, spent money on her, had her fixed, and got all her shots and stuff. But the dog didn't like her. She just didn't like them, and she spent all her time over here with me every time I was out. Next thing I know, the owner's bringing me the dog food and the dog dish and says, hey, the dog hates us and loves you. You just take her. And I wasn't going to leave her without a home, so I brought her in. And I forgot the question.
I was just talking about that story where she, I think it's when she got struck by lightning.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Broke down their door.
But anyhow, so since she felt like she probably, both houses, ours and her neighbors, were hers, she spent a lot of time over in their yard too. Well, she was never afraid of a thunderstorm before. But anyhow, I saw her in their backyard, and a thunderstorm was coming up, and I was heading into our house, and lightning hit, and it sounded like it hit right in my neighbor's backyard. Well, I assume it struck Sadie, and she ran to the nearest house, which was theirs. They had a screened-in porch, and she went right through one of the screens, starts scratching the dickens out of their door, banging into it. They went and opened the door. She ran into their house, behind their couch, barricaded herself, and sat there shaking. So the neighbor came over and says, hey, man, look, I got a problem. I can't even get her out. So I went over there and coaxed her out from behind the couch. She was still, very upset and shaking. And I brought her over here, told my neighbor I voluntarily paid to get the screen fixed in their porch, and he said it wasn't that big a deal. He'd take care of it. But after that, the poor thing, if a thunderstorm came up, the only way I could get her to relax is if I laid down on top of her so she couldn't get back up. And eventually she would give in and lay there and shiver till the thunderstorm was over with.
So in your 30 plus years of mechanic experience, what is the hardest problem you've had to deal with or fix?
Wow, that's a big one. Well, I get a lot of cars because I'm very good at the wiring stuff. So I get a lot of cars that other shops can't fix. One of them was a Mercedes where the blower motor wouldn't work. I can tell when there's high resistance in a wire and the voltage drops It is something that a lot of people don't understand in this business. My father was an electrician for Georgia Power, so he taught me about electricity early. I used to help him go rewire houses that he did on the side when I was a kid. So I've got a better understanding of how wires work than the average technician does. And on this Mercedes, the way they ran the wiring harness, it actually started getting its voltage at a spot underneath the passenger seat. Then it ran through a channel in the floorboard. And to find this, I wound up taking out the seat, the carpet, the padding, and the foam insulation that's underneath it to finally find this wire. And once I found it, I brought the managers and stuff like that down there to see it so I could explain to them how I was going to have to fix it. They seemed overwhelmed that I found it, and I actually took pictures of it and sent it to some of the other shops to say, hey, if you ever run into something weird like this is what he found. But anyhow, I fixed it. Nobody else could. Mercedes couldn't fix it. I've had stuff like that with like a Chrysler dealership. Actually sent a car here to the house because the dealership couldn't fix it. And it wound up being something silly that their technicians definitely should have found. They just didn't. I had it fixed in an hour, but I didn't want to throw their technicians under the bus. So when I called them and told them it was ready, I told them it took me about 4 hours to figure it out and fix it. And just explained to them that it was a wiring issue and left it at that. I didn't make it to where it was, hey, your technicians were really negligent not finding this first. I didn't want to throw somebody under a bus. Plus, I also wanted to get paid. And I figure sometimes you got to get paid for what you know as well as what you do. It may have only taken me an hour, but they'd already spent 10, 15 hours on it and couldn't fix it. So I didn't feel bad about charging 4 hours worth.
So with this Mercedes, how did you go about solving the problem?
Well, something that I learned from my dad. A wire, if you put voltage in it at one end, and it's 12 volts, well, it's got to make it to the other end at 12 volts. At the beginning of this one, I had 12 volts. At the end of it, I only had 4. Now, in between the beginning and the end of it was probably 15 feet of wire that went through the dash, through the floorboard, under the seat. So it was quite a length of wire to trace. And one of the things you don't see in a car when you get in it is the wiring. All the wiring is always tucked in behind something. So you have to take body parts, or interior parts in this case, out to find this stuff. I had the glove box out of it, the seat, the carpet, to get access to it. And you just keep going until that 4 volts finally turns into 12. And then you know you just passed the spot where the voltage drops. And in this case, it was actually a connector, a single wire connector, absolutely buried in the floor pan. And, it was just common deal, something my dad taught me. If it starts at 12, it's got to end at 12. If it doesn't, there's a problem in the middle somewhere. You just got to trace it down.
So you just went through and replaced the connector?
Yeah, I actually cut the connector out and about 6 inches worth of wiring. And then I soldered, shrink wrapped another wire in its place. Cool. It's good forever. It'll never have that problem again.
So we talked about your time as a mechanic, a musician, a go-kart racer. Are there any other careers that you've had throughout your life?
No career, but like one of the neatest things I've ever done was when you and Tori got to the point where you're playing ball. I somehow got roped into coaching, and I have never considered myself a coach, but out of all the hobbies I have ever had, none of them compare to spending time coaching ball with my kids. Or doing anything with my kids, but, we were very lucky. I mean, my dad told me once, when, like I told you, he coached me and my sister both. And the men's league, Georgia Power Team, he coached it. And he was always winning. And he had told me, and I heard him tell other people, teach kids to play ball the right way, the wins will come. And I lived by that while I was coaching, and just got real lucky, man. Had a lot of wins, The one with being you winning a World Series when you were 7. I did give up the head coaching after that. I mean, I figured, shoot, after that, that was a fluke. That was just really me getting good assistant coaches. I don't think I had that much to do with it. But as an assistant coach with you, I mean, gosh, that team won a little bit of everything. Not many kids your age have a collection of rings like what you've got from championship games. But whether it was me and you doing baseball, me and Tori doing softball, or teaching her to drive, or me and Cameron doing stuff like going to the movies, none of those hobbies have ever meant more to me than what I have done with y'all. Is someday, it's something that until you become a parent, you don't know what kind of joy it is. You really don't.
And throughout those hobbies, what was one point where you just knew it was that moment that you just loved that hobby so much? And what led to that?
Well, with the music, I actually wanted to be a guitar player, not a bass player. And that very first band that I was in had 3 guitar players and no bass player. And we tried several bass players, and they were all horrible. One day I walk into practice, and my friend Randy hands me a bass and told me I could put my guitar up. I was going to be the bass player. And I said, well, why me? We got 3 guitar players. And he said, well, we took a vote, and you were the worst guitar player. So I had to play bass, which had really backfired on them. None of those guys ever played anything, never played in a band after that, high school, and I got to go play with Grammy winners. So that, it was kind of a blessing in disguise. It just kind of came natural. I don't read music. I don't study music. I just, they gave me a bass, said play it, and it turned out I could. And that was pretty cool.
During your time coaching, what's your favorite story from the ball field?
Favorite story from the ball field? Well, it's not the time I broke my son's nose. It's definitely not that one. Well, I'd have to say winning the World Series. That was probably it. Well, I'll take it back. The one that meant the most to me was when we won the state championship. You were a little more advanced as far as understanding the game. When the last out was made and we won it, it was actually a pop fly that you caught. You realized that was the end of the game and we won it. A lot of the other kids didn't, but once you caught that ball, you didn't celebrate with your teammates. You ran straight for me and you actually jumped up in my arms because you were happy that we won the state championship. that's something I will never forget. I mean, I'll never forget any of it, but that one right there actually meant more to me than the World Series did. It was also a lot more competitive game. The World Series, that last game, we kind of just rolled all over them, but that was special, and it was mostly special because, something I got to do with my son. Something I'll never forget. You were only 7. You probably don't even remember it, but I will never forget it. The things when I was 7, I don't remember much either.
From the time that we spent with the Seminoles after winning that World Series, what's your most memorable memory that stuck with you from that team, like specific?
Winning the 2 Super NITs. I remember them extremely well, and something you probably won't remember. It was in that same year, and it was a tournament we won, but it wasn't a big tournament. It was just a regular tournament. What you remember getting out. You actually hit a home run, and as you were going around the bases, the team gathered at home plate to congratulate you, and you jumped up in the air to land on the plate. Well, Aiden tapped you on the shoulder before you got there. Well, the umpire behind the plate, he was a rookie. It was his first tournament, and he called you out because you got touched 6 inches before you hit the home plate. There's rules against it, but the rules are designed so they don't have the team flooding and getting all over the field, and like meeting you at third base or something. That didn't happen. The call never should have been made. The second base umpire came up and actually said something to him about it too. Well, that particular day, I was also coaching first base, and I realized the guy felt guilty after he did it, and I actually took advantage of it to rub it in his face. And something you guys didn't know is that every time the inning was over or beginning, I had to walk by that umpire. And I had something kind of smart to say every time I walked by him. He just kind of held his head down and never said anything, so I wasn't worried about him throwing me out of the game. But I guarantee you that's one umpire that tells a story of how he messed up on his very first tournament. And he probably exaggerates some of the stuff that the first base coach said to him during that game. And some of the stuff I really wouldn't want to say in this interview because I wasn't exactly nice.
I remember one of the things that stuck with me from our time off the field with that team is the time we were in Orange Beach, and there was that drunk guy that tried to knock in Carter in the door.
Yeah.
Run me through that story from your perspective.
Oh, man, I felt so bad for the guy. It started, we were in the pool, and this was a very big guy. He was probably pushing 60 years old, but he was about a 6'5" guy. And he was being real friendly with you guys, and he was being pretty cool, but he was also drunk. Well, you guys were wanting to get on people's shoulders and throw some kind of ball around in the pool. And he wanted to get in on it and put some guys on his shoulder, but he kept going down underwater. And finally, I took one of you kids off of his shoulder, and I said, hey, man, look, you need to sit this one out. Well, then we went about doing our own thing and stuff like that. But anyhow, we were walking, a bunch of us just hanging out together. And here comes that guy. He had gotten so drunk at the pool that his wife got frustrated and left him. And he was so drunk, he did not remember what apartment he was in. And for some reason, he thought he belonged in the one where Carter and them were at, and he kept trying to get in. And so all of us adults were trying to walk him around, keep him calm. Coach Justin was trying to keep him calm and get him to tell us, which room he was in, and he just couldn't remember. The poor guy got paranoid, thinking that we were going to hurt him, and he took off running to break into, their door, and that's when Chris took and whacked him one with an elbow, and the poor guy was hammered. You could have blew at him hard and he'd have fell over, but Chris wound up knocking the guy out. We had to call an ambulance to come get him. I felt sorry for the guy. Chris really was out of line. He never should have done that. We could have handled him without hurting him. But instead, the police wrote it up as the guy being drunken and disorderly, and they took him to a hospital and then probably to jail. But that's, another one of the bad things that happened to these power drinkers. The guy got so drunk that he could still walk but couldn't even remember what room he was in.